On a quiet September day in 2020, 5 members of the Future Forecasting Group sat down for what they assumed would be a routine training exercise. These weren't amateur psychics or weekend mystics. These were professional remote viewers, individuals trained in protocols developed by the Central Intelligence Agency and Stanford Research Institute. They were handed a simple coordinate, a blind target with no context, no hints, no background information. What they perceived in that sterile room would shatter every assumption about our place in the universe. Nim drew something that made his hand shake. Antenna, he called them, though they looked more like antlers sprouting from a humanoid figure. In 15 years of remote viewing, he had never encountered anything like it. The thing he sketched bore an uncanny resemblance to ancient cave paintings discovered by subscribers afterward, petroglyphs that depicted the same antenna bearing entities thousands of years before telescopes existed. Dick perceived consciousness wormholes, pathways through space and time that defied every law of physics we thought we understood. Edward detected demonic possessions attacking human chakra points, as if something was systematically targeting the energy centers that mystics claim connect us to higher consciousness. When the target was revealed, the room fell silent. They had been viewing Comet Atlas, an object that mainstream science dismisses as just another chunk of ice and rock from beyond our solar system. But what if science is wrong? What if the remote viewers saw something that our instruments cannot detect? Something that governments around the world are desperately trying to hide from a population already on the edge of chaos. The timing is no coincidence. As 32/Atlas approaches its closest pass to Earth, global tensions are escalating at an unprecedented rate. Russia launches its largest drone swarm attack on Ukraine. Exactly as Edward predicted in his world events forecast, European hospitals receive orders to stockpile medical supplies for mass casualties expected within the year. Every major power flexes military muscle while their populations are told to prepare 14-day emergency supplies. The United Kingdom tests its emergency broadcast system for only the second time in history. It's as if the entire planet is preparing for something catastrophic, something that's coming from the direction of that innocent-looking comet. But Atlas isn't the first time remote viewers have detected non-human intelligence in our cosmic neighborhood. For over 50 years, trained psychic operatives working for the world's most secretive intelligence agencies have been mapping a reality that defies everything we've been taught about life in the universe. Their findings, buried in classified documents and dismissed by mainstream academia, paint a picture so terrifying that it may explain why every government on Earth seems to be preparing for the unthinkable. This isn't science for sleep. This isn't the work of some sleepy scientist documenting peaceful cosmic phenomena. This is an investigation into the darkest possibilities hidden within decades of psychic intelligence gathering. We're about to explore scenarios so disturbing that they'll make you fall asleep fast. Not from boredom, but from the overwhelming need to escape into unconsciousness rather than face what might be coming for humanity. Before we dive deeper into this abyss of cosmic horror, I need you to do something. Hit that like button if you're ready to question everything you thought you knew about our universe. Subscribe if you want to stay informed about developments that mainstream media won't touch. And in the comments, tell me where you are in the world right now, what time it is as you watch this, and whether you've ever experienced something that made you question the official narrative about what's really out there. Because what we're about to explore suggests that experiences like yours might be more connected to global events than anyone wants to admit. Let's start with the elephant in the room. How do we know that remote viewing actually works? How can we trust the perceptions of people claiming to see across vast distances using nothing but their minds? The answer lies in a program so successful that it operated for over 20 years within the highest levels of American intelligence. A program that officially didn't exist until declassified documents forced the government to admit what they'd been hiding. Project Stargate began in the 1970s when the Central Intelligence Agency realized that the Soviet Union was investing heavily in psychic research. American intelligence couldn't afford to ignore the possibility that consciousness itself might be weaponized. At Stanford Research Institute, physicists Harold Puthoff and Russell Tarr began testing individuals who claimed extraordinary perceptual abilities. What they discovered would change everything. The protocols were rigorous, designed to eliminate fraud, coincidence, and wishful thinking. Remote viewers were given coordinates, nothing more. They had no access to maps, no briefings, no hints about what they were supposed to perceive. They were often isolated in special chambers, cut off from any possible sources of conventional information. Yet time after time, they accurately described distant locations, hidden military installations, and events happening thousands of miles away. Joseph McManagle, designated as Remote Viewer Number 1, achieved accuracy rates that range from 72 to 88% depending on the evaluation criteria. Under controlled laboratory conditions, verified by multiple scientists, he could perceive details about targets that should have been impossible to know. The statistical probability of achieving such results through chance alone was so minuscule that even the most skeptical researchers had to acknowledge that something unprecedented was occurring. But here's where the story takes a sinister turn. While the public face of remote viewing research focused on military applications like locating enemy submarines or monitoring foreign weapons programs, classified operations were exploring far more disturbing territories. Remote viewers weren't just being asked to spy on human adversaries. They were being tasked with investigating phenomena that suggested we might not be alone in the universe, and that whatever was out there might not have humanity's best interests at heart. The first major crack in the official narrative appeared in 1984 when Joe McMannel was handed a sealed envelope containing coordinates that pointed toward Mars. He wasn't told what planet he was viewing, wasn't given any context about the target. The envelope simply read, "Planet Mars, time of interest approximately 1 million BC. What McMannel perceived during that session would remain classified for decades, hidden away in CIA vaults until Freedom of Information Act requests finally forced its release. McMannel described seeing massive pyramidal structures larger than anything on Earth, construction so advanced that it suggested engineering capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology believes existed 1 million years ago. He perceived tall, thin, humanoid figures, clearly intelligent, clearly desperate, dying from some catastrophic environmental collapse. These weren't primitive beings scratching out a subsistence existence. They were the remnants of an advanced civilization watching their world die, trapped in protective structures as their atmosphere turned toxic. The implications were staggering. If McManagle was accurate, and his track record suggested he usually was, then Mars had once hosted an intelligent species that possessed technology sophisticated enough to build monuments that dwarfed human achievements. More disturbing still, these beings had faced some kind of planetary catastrophe that forced them into underground shelters, where they ultimately perished. The obvious question that intelligence analysts were afraid to ask was whether the same forces that destroyed Martian civilization might be turning their attention toward Earth. McMannel's descriptions weren't random hallucinations or science fiction fantasies. When he later demanded access to NASA's photographic archives, The images he uncovered showed geological formations that matched his remote viewing perceptions with unsettling accuracy. Structures that appeared artificial linear features that suggested engineering patterns that defied explanation through natural geological processes. NASA officials who reviewed his findings privately admitted that certain images did indeed show anomalies that couldn't be easily explained. But public statements continued to maintain that Mars had always been a lifeless world. What if the official silence wasn't about protecting scientific credibility, but about concealing a far more terrifying truth? What if the same intelligence that destroyed Martian civilization was still active in our solar system? And what if Comet Atlas wasn't a random chunk of ice, but a reconnaissance probe sent to evaluate Earth's current defensive capabilities? The Mars revelations were just the beginning. As declassified documents continued to surface, a pattern emerged that suggested remote viewers had been detecting non-human intelligence across multiple locations for decades. Each discovery was more disturbing than the last, painting a picture of cosmic surveillance and infiltration that made humanity look like insects under a microscope. Ingo Swann, another legendary remote viewer whose abilities had been verified under the most stringent laboratory conditions, claimed to have detected artificial structures on the far side of the Moon. During sessions conducted in the 1970s, Swann perceived what he described as domes, towers, and geometric patterns that didn't match any known natural lunar formations. Most unsettling of all, he reported observing extraterrestrial entities actively engaged in construction activities, as if they were building installations designed to remain hidden from Earth-based observation. Swann's lunar observations were initially dismissed as imagination or contamination from science fiction sources. But when his detailed descriptions were compared with high-resolution images obtained by later lunar missions, uncomfortable correlations began to emerge. Certain regions of the Moon's far side showed geometric patterns and angular formations that seemed to defy conventional explanations. NASA's public position remained that all lunar features were natural geological formations, but internal memoranda revealed significant disagreement among scientists who had reviewed the data. The most terrifying aspect of Swann's discoveries wasn't what he saw, but what he sensed about the entities he observed. They weren't primitive aliens struggling to survive in a hostile environment. They were methodical, purposeful, clearly following some kind of systematic plan. The structures they were building suggested long-term habitation, as if they were establishing permanent bases designed to monitor and potentially control activities on Earth. What if the Moon isn't the natural satellite that astronomy textbooks describe, but an artificial observation platform placed in Earth orbit by an intelligence that has been studying human civilization for millennia? What if the mysterious gravitational anomalies detected by lunar missions aren't natural phenomena, but evidence of massive technological installations hidden beneath the surface? What if every space program on Earth is being monitored by entities whose intentions remain completely unknown? The pattern of extraterrestrial surveillance became even more disturbing when remote viewers began detecting underground installations on Earth itself. Pat Price, a former police officer whose psychic abilities had proven remarkably accurate in criminal investigations, made discoveries that shook the intelligence community to its core. While conducting independent remote viewing sessions, Price claimed to have located 4 underground alien bases hidden beneath mountain ranges around the world. These weren't ancient ruins or abandoned structures. According to Price's perceptions, the bases were actively occupied, housing different groups of entities with specialized functions. Mount Hayes in Alaska contained what appeared to be a command and control facility with sophisticated equipment and communication systems that suggested real-time coordination with off-world locations. Dessin. Mount Peredo on the Spain-France border housed what Price described as a research installation, where biological samples were being analysed and modified. Mount Nani in Africa appeared to be a manufacturing centre, producing technology that defied human understanding. The fourth installation, located in the Australian mountains, seemed designed for deep space communication, as if it was serving as a relay station for messages travelling across interstellar distances. Price's discoveries weren't kept secret within the intelligence community. Skip at Water, the operations and training officer for the Stargate Remote Viewing Unit, organised Project 8200, a systematic attempt to verify Price's claims using multiple trained viewers. The results were both fascinating and terrifying. Independent remote viewers working without knowledge of Price's original findings described identical structures, identical technologies, and identical evidence of ongoing extraterrestrial activities. One viewer reported seeing vast underground chambers filled with equipment that resembled computer systems, but operated on principles that seemed to transcend conventional electronics. Another perceived tall figures moving purposefully through corridors carved from solid rock, clearly non-human, but demonstrating intelligence and coordination that suggested advanced social organization. Most disturbing of all, several viewers detected the presence of humans within these installations, apparently working alongside the alien entities in some kind of collaborative arrangement. What if these underground bases aren't recent arrivals, but part of an infiltration network that has been operating for generations? What if certain elements within human governments have been aware of and potentially cooperating with these installations? What if the sudden global military preparations aren't responses to terrestrial threats, but desperate attempts to prepare for a conflict that has already begun? The evidence suggests that remote viewers have been mapping a shadow reality that coexists with the world we think we understand. Every major discovery points toward the same terrifying conclusion that Earth has been under systematic observation and infiltration by non-human intelligences whose ultimate agenda remains unknown. The conventional scientific community has dismissed these findings as delusion or fraud, but the pattern is too consistent, too detailed, and too disturbing to ignore. Now, with Comet Atlas approaching its closest pass to our planet, the remote viewing revelations take on a new and sinister significance. What if this interstellar visitor isn't a random cosmic object, but part of a coordinated operation that has been planned for decades? What if the humanoid entities detected during the future forecasting group session aren't passengers, but pilots, steering their craft toward predetermined coordinates for purposes that will soon become horribly clear? The timeline is accelerating. Global military forces are mobilizing. Emergency broadcast systems are being tested. Hospitals are stockpiling supplies for mass casualties. World leaders who normally hide behind diplomatic language are making increasingly desperate statements about preparation for unprecedented challenges. Meanwhile, mainstream media continues to treat Atlas as just another astronomical curiosity, a harmless ice ball that will provide spectacular viewing opportunities for amateur astronomers. But remote viewers see something different. They perceive consciousness, intelligence, purpose. They detect entities whose technology allows them to manipulate matter and energy in ways that violate our understanding of physics. They sense hostile intent disguised as scientific curiosity, reconnaissance disguised as random cosmic wandering. Most terrifying of all, they perceive that whatever is aboard Atlas has been coordinating with installations already present on Earth and throughout our solar system. The ancient cave paintings that match Nim sketches aren't coincidences or pareidolia. They're historical records, evidence that these antenna-bearing entities have visited Earth before, possibly many times throughout human history? What if they've been monitoring our technological development, waiting for us to reach a specific level of capability before revealing themselves? What if Comet Atlas represents the culmination of a surveillance program that has been operating for thousands of years? Consider the implications. If remote viewers can accurately perceive these phenomena, then consciousness itself operates according to principles that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. The human mind might be capable of accessing information across vast distances and temporal barriers, suggesting that awareness is not confined to individual brains, but exists as a fundamental property of the universe itself. This would mean that the entities aboard Atlas possess similar capabilities, but developed to a far more sophisticated degree. They can perceive our thoughts, our preparations, our defensive capabilities without ever coming within range of our detection systems. They know exactly how we'll respond to their presence because they've been monitoring human psychology for generations. Every military strategy, every contingency plan, every secret weapon has been observed and analysed by minds that operate on timescales and with perspectives that dwarf human comprehension. The consciousness wormholes that Dick perceived during the Atlas remote viewing session might represent something even more disturbing than physical infiltration. What if these entities can manipulate human awareness directly, implanting thoughts and perceptions that feel like natural mental processes, but actually serve alien agendas? What if the sudden global military mobilization isn't a response to detected threats, but the result of subconscious programming designed to position human forces exactly where the aliens want them? The demonic possessions that Edward detected might not be supernatural phenomena, but technological intrusions into human consciousness, systematic hacking of the energy systems that mystics claim connect individual awareness to cosmic intelligence. If these chakra points represent real neurological networks that interface with non-local consciousness, then disrupting them would effectively isolate humans from their intuitive warning systems, making us psychologically blind to dangers that our deeper awareness would normally detect. What if the entities aboard Atlas aren't here to invade in any conventional sense, but to complete a process that has been underway for decades? What if they've been gradually altering human consciousness, preparing us to accept a new reality where Earth becomes a subsidiary planet in some vast galactic administrative system? The underground bases detected by remote viewers might not be military installations, but processing centers, places where human beings are systematically modified to serve functions within an interstellar civilization that views us as a useful but inferior species. The pattern becomes clearer when we examine the historical context. Remote viewing research began during the Cold War, ostensibly as a tool for gaining intelligence advantages over terrestrial adversaries. But the most significant discoveries consistently pointed toward non-human intelligence operating within our solar system. Government agencies that invested millions of dollars in psychic research weren't primarily interested in spying on the Soviet Union. They were investigating phenomena that suggested Earth was already under some form of extraterrestrial supervision. The official termination of Project Stargate in 1995 wasn't the result of failed methodology or lack of useful intelligence. It was a strategic decision to move the most sensitive research into deeper classification levels, away from congressional oversight and Freedom of Information Act requests. The public announcement that remote viewing had proven operationally useless was a deliberate misdirection designed to prevent civilian researchers from developing capabilities that might interfere with ongoing intelligence operations. What if the real purpose of government remote viewing programs was never to gather intelligence about foreign nations, but to monitor the activities of extraterrestrial installations that had been detected through other means? What if the sudden classification and denial of successful results was motivated by the discovery that these alien entities were already aware of human psychic capabilities and were taking countermeasures to prevent further detection? The evidence suggests that we're dealing with intelligences that operate on multiple levels simultaneously. They maintain physical installations on Earth, the Moon, and Mars while simultaneously manipulating human consciousness through mechanisms that we're only beginning to understand. They can influence global events without revealing their presence, steering humanity toward configurations that serve their purposes while maintaining plausible deniability about their involvement. Comet Atlas represents the next phase of whatever operation they've been conducting. The humanoid entities detected by remote viewers aren't scouts or advance teams. They're supervisors arriving to oversee the final implementation of plans that have been developing for generations. The timing of their approach coincides with unprecedented global instability, technological development that has reached critical thresholds, and environmental changes that threaten human civilization's continued existence. What if climate change isn't entirely the result of human industrial activity, but includes deliberate modifications to Earth's atmospheric systems? What if the technological singularity that futurists predict isn't a natural evolution of human artificial intelligence, but the activation of systems that have been covertly installed over decades? What if the global political chaos that seems to be pushing humanity toward World War II isn't the result of natural political tensions, but the consequence of systematic psychological manipulation designed to weaken our resistance to external control? The remote viewing evidence suggests that we're not dealing with a future invasion, but the culmination of an infiltration that has been ongoing for decades or possibly centuries. Every major technological advancement, every political crisis, every social transformation might have been subtly guided toward outcomes that serve alien rather than human interests. We think we're making independent choices about our civilization's direction, but we might actually be following a script written by minds that view human history as a carefully managed experiment. The underground installations detected by Pat Price and verified by Project 8200 represent just the visible portion of a much larger infrastructure. If extraterrestrial entities have been operating on Earth for extended periods, they would need manufacturing facilities, communication networks, transportation systems, and coordination centers. The 4 mountain bases might be just the major hubs in a network that includes hundreds of smaller installations scattered across the planet. This would explain why certain geographic regions consistently report anomalous phenomena. The areas around Mount Hayes, Mount Peredo, Mount Nani, and the Australian installation are all known for unusual electromagnetic effects. Unexplained aircraft sightings and electronic equipment malfunctions. Local populations in these regions often report psychological disturbances, time distortions, and encounters with entities that don't match any known biological classifications. What if these aren't random paranormal hotspots, but the inevitable side effects of large-scale technological operations conducted by intelligences whose energy systems interfere with terrestrial electronics, abandoned human neurology? What if the increasing frequency of such reports worldwide indicates that the alien infrastructure is expanding, preparing for operations that will require much larger installations than those currently detected? The lunar installations described by Ingo Swann might serve as the primary coordination center for Earth-based operations. The Moon's position provides ideal surveillance coverage of terrestrial activities while remaining beyond the reach of human investigation. From lunar facilities, alien administrators could monitor global communications, track technological developments, and coordinate the activities of underground installations without risk of direct interference. But the most disturbing possibility is that the alien presence extends far beyond physical installations and technological infrastructure. If consciousness itself operates according to principles that allow remote viewing to function, then sufficiently advanced intelligences could manipulate human awareness on a global scale. They could implant thoughts, modify emotions, alter perceptions, and influence decisions without ever revealing their presence. This would mean that humanity's entire psychological landscape might be artificially constructed. Our beliefs about reality, our emotional responses to events, our collective decision-making processes could all be the products of systematic mental manipulation conducted by entities whose goals remain hidden. We think we're responding to natural circumstances and making rational choices, but we might actually be performing according to behavioral modifications that serve alien purposes. The consciousness wormholes detected during the Atlas remote viewing session could represent pathways through which such manipulation occurs. If consciousness is not confined to individual brains, but exists as a field that connects all aware beings, then entities with advanced understanding of this field could access human minds remotely, inserting thoughts and perceptions that feel completely natural but actually originate from external sources. Consider the implications for everything we think we know about human history and current events. What if the major religious traditions weren't inspired by divine revelation, but by alien entities establishing psychological control systems? What if the scientific revolution wasn't a natural intellectual development, but a carefully managed process designed to advance human technology towards specific goals? What if the current political chaos and social fragmentation aren't the results of natural cultural evolution, but the consequences of deliberate psychological warfare designed to prevent effective resistance to alien agendas? The timeline is accelerating towards some kind of resolution. Global military forces are mobilizing for conflicts that officials can't clearly explain. Emergency systems are being tested as if massive disruptions are anticipated. Medical facilities are preparing for casualties on scales that suggest expectations of unprecedented disasters. Meanwhile, Comet Atlas continues its approach, carrying entities whose intentions remote viewers describe with terms like demonic possession and consciousness attack. What if the approaching revelation isn't first contact, but the dropping of the pretense that has been maintained for decades? What if alien entities decide that covert operations are no longer sufficient and that direct control is now necessary? The underground installations could transform from hidden bases into command centers for openly administered occupation. The lunar facilities could reveal themselves as the headquarters for a colonial administration that has been managing Earth as a subsidiary planet. The resistance capabilities that humanity could mount against such a revelation would be severely limited. Our military forces are designed to fight terrestrial conflicts against adversaries who operate according to familiar physical principles. Our political institutions assume that decision-makers are human beings motivated by recognizable interests. Our psychological defenses evolve to protect against threats that originate within the natural environment of Earth. We have no established protocols for dealing with entities whose technological capabilities allow them to manipulate matter and energy according to principles we don't understand. We have no diplomatic frameworks for negotiating with intelligences whose goals operate on timescales that span millennia. Most critically, we have no mental defenses against consciousness manipulation techniques that could turn our own awareness against us. The remote viewing evidence suggests that such techniques are already being deployed. The fact that trained viewers can perceive alien activities despite obvious attempts at concealment indicates that the entities involved either can't completely hide their presence or choose not to for reasons that serve their purposes. They might want certain humans to become aware of their operations as part of a gradual disclosure process designed to condition us for eventual revelation. What if the current global crisis represents the final phase of such conditioning economic instability? Political polarization, environmental degradation, and social fragmentation could all be psychological pressure tactics designed to make human populations desperate enough to accept external management. When civilization appears to be collapsing and traditional institutions seem incapable of providing solutions, people become willing to embrace alternatives that they would normally reject. The entities aboard Comet Atlas might be arriving not as conquerors, but as saviors, offering technological solutions to problems that their own covert operations helped create. They could present themselves as benevolent administrators who've been monitoring Earth for our own protection, reluctantly revealing themselves because human mismanagement has reached critical levels that threaten planetary stability. Such a scenario would be far more effective than military conquest, because it would secure human cooperation rather than resistance. Populations that believe they're being rescued are much easier to manage than populations that know they're being conquered. The alien entities would gain administrative control over Earth while maintaining the illusion that they're helping rather than dominating. The underground installations could transform overnight from hidden bases into emergency coordination centers, staffed by alien administrators and human collaborators who present themselves as the only remaining authority capable of managing global crisis. The lunar facilities could be revealed as Earth's new administrative headquarters, where decisions about planetary resource allocation and population management are made by intelligences whose superior capabilities justify their authority. The consciousness manipulation capabilities detected by remote viewers would ensure that most humans experience this transition as liberation rather than conquest. People would feel grateful for alien intervention, confident that their new administrators possess the wisdom and technology necessary to solve problems that human governments couldn't handle. Resistance movements would be undermined not through military suppression but through psychological modifications that make opposition literally unthinkable. This scenario explains why every major government seems to be preparing for unprecedented challenges while maintaining official silence about their specific nature. Political and military leaders who have been briefed about the actual situation understand that conventional defense strategies are completely inadequate. They're preparing emergency protocols not because they believe resistance is possible, but because they need to maintain social order during the transition period, the testing of emergency broadcast systems, the stockpiling of medical supplies, the mobilization of military forces, and the preparation of civilian populations for extended emergencies all make sense as crisis management rather than defense planning. Officials know that dramatic changes are coming and that their primary responsibility is to prevent panic and social collapse during the revelation process. What if the war preparations that seem to be escalating between major powers aren't actually intended for terrestrial conflicts, but represent desperate attempts to demonstrate human military capabilities to alien observers? Nations might be engaging in proxy conflicts and threatening behaviors not because they want to fight each other, but because they're trying to prove that Earth still possesses independent defensive potential. Alternatively, the apparent movement toward global warfare might be the final phase of alien psychological manipulation designed to exhaust human military resources and demonstrate the futility of resistance before revealing the extraterrestrial presence. By encouraging terrestrial conflicts that waste resources and lives while solving nothing, alien administrators could ensure that humanity emerges from the crisis period too depleted to mount effective opposition to external control, the remote viewing evidence suggests that we're living through the climax of a process that has been developing for much longer than most people realize. Every strange phenomenon, every unexplained event, every conspiracy theory that seems too bizarre to be credible might actually be fragments of a much larger reality that we're only beginning to perceive. The humanoid entities aboard Comet Atlas represent just the most recent addition to an alien presence that has been shaping human history for generations. What if the acceleration of technological development over the past century wasn't a natural intellectual breakthrough, but the result of systematic knowledge transfer from alien sources? What if the scientific discoveries that revolutionized human capabilities were guided revelations designed to advance our civilization towards specific configurations that serve extraterrestrial purposes? The development of nuclear weapons, space travel, global communications, artificial intelligence, and genetic engineering all occurred within a remarkably brief historical period. The pace of change has been so rapid that human social and psychological adaptation mechanisms haven't had time to adjust. We've acquired godlike technological capabilities while retaining primitive tribal instincts, creating a combination that's both powerful and unstable. This configuration might not be accidental. Alien administrators might have deliberately accelerated human technological development while preventing corresponding advances in wisdom, emotional maturity, and social coordination. The result is a species that possesses dangerous capabilities but lacks the psychological stability to use them responsibly, creating justification for external management. The current global crisis represents the inevitable outcome of this deliberately unbalanced development. Human civilization has reached a point where our technological power threatens planetary stability. But our psychological limitations prevent us from implementing effective solutions. We need guidance from intelligences that possess both advanced capabilities and mature judgment. Even if accepting such guidance means surrendering our independence, the entities aboard Comet Atlas might be responding to signals sent by Earth-based alien installations, indicating that human civilization has reached the predetermined threshold for direct intervention. The underground bases detected by remote viewers could have been monitoring our technological and psychological development for decades, reporting regularly to off-world administrators about our progress toward conditions that justify revelation. The consciousness attacks detected during the Atlas remote viewing session might represent final preparations for this transition. If alien entities can manipulate human awareness directly, they would need to establish control systems that prevent organized resistance, while maintaining the illusion of free choice, attacking chakra points, disrupting consciousness wormholes, and implanting thoughts through demonic possession techniques could all be technological procedures designed to isolate human minds from sources of intuitive guidance that might interfere with alien objectives. What if our spiritual traditions aren't entirely human creations, but include systematic programming designed to make us psychologically receptive to external authority? What if religious concepts like divine judgment, salvation, and surrender to higher powers were originally alien psychological conditioning techniques designed to prepare us for eventual revelation of their presence? The pattern suggests that we're approaching a moment when pretense becomes unnecessary and covert operations transform into open administration. The acceleration of global crisis, the mobilization of emergency systems, and the approach of Comet Atlas all indicate that we're living through the transition period between hidden influence and direct control. The question isn't whether this transition will occur, but how humanity will respond when the truth becomes undeniable. Will we accept alien management as benevolent guidance from superior intelligences? Or will we recognize it as conquest disguised as salvation? Will we cooperate with systems designed to optimize planetary administration? Or will we resist control mechanisms that treat us as subordinate species requiring supervision? The remote viewing evidence suggests that our choices might be more limited than we imagine. If consciousness itself can be manipulated by sufficiently advanced technology, then our perceptions of the situation and our emotional responses to various alternatives might already be artificially influenced. We might think we're making independent decisions about humanity's future while actually following psychological programming that serves alien rather than human interests. The entities detected aboard Comet Atlas possess capabilities that transcend anything human civilization can currently deploy. They can travel between star systems using principles that violate our understanding of physics. They can manipulate consciousness through mechanisms that we're only beginning to recognize. They've been operating within our solar system for decades or centuries without revealing their presence, demonstrating operational security capabilities far beyond anything human intelligence agencies have achieved. Most critically, they appear to be coordinating with installations that have been established throughout our local cosmic environment. The lunar bases described by Ingo Swann, the underground facilities detected by Pat Price, the Martian structures perceived by Joe McMannel, and now the approaching Atlas entities all represent components of an integrated system that spans multiple worlds and operates according to long-term planning that encompasses timescales far beyond human political and economic cycles. We're not dealing with random alien visitors or isolated contact events. We're confronting a mature interstellar civilization that has been systematically evaluating and gradually infiltrating human society as part of administrative procedures that probably apply to many worlds throughout the galaxy. Earth represents just one project among many for intelligences whose experience with managing primitive civilizations spans thousands of worlds and millions of years. The implications are overwhelming. Every assumption about human independence, terrestrial sovereignty, and our species' cosmic significance might be illusions maintained to preserve social stability. While more knowledgeable entities make decisions about our actual future, we think we're the dominant intelligence on Earth, but we might actually be junior partners in arrangements that were established long before our current civilization developed. The approaching revelation will force humanity to confront truths that our psychological and cultural systems weren't designed to handle. We'll need to rapidly develop new frameworks for understanding our place in a universe where intelligence operates on scales and according to principles that dwarf human comprehension. We'll need to make decisions about cooperation versus resistance without fully understanding the consequences of either choice. The remote viewing evidence suggests that these decisions might already be made for us. If alien entities can manipulate human consciousness directly, then our apparent choices about how to respond to their revelation might actually be predetermined outcomes designed to achieve specific administrative objectives. We might experience the illusion of democratic decision while actually implementing policies that serve purposes we don't understand. The consciousness wormholes, the demonic possessions, the attacks on chakra points all suggest that the battle for human awareness is already underway. The question isn't whether alien entities will attempt to control human consciousness, but whether we can recognize and resist control mechanisms that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The fate of human independence might depend on our ability to develop consciousness disciplines that protect us from technological intrusions, that feel like natural mental processes, What if the solution isn't military resistance or political negotiation, but psychological liberation? What if the alien entity's most powerful weapon is our own unconscious cooperation with systems that limit our awareness? What if true resistance requires developing consciousness capabilities that transcend the neurological programming that makes us susceptible to external manipulation? The ancient cave paintings that match the Atlas entities might represent historical records of previous contact events. Times when alien administrators revealed themselves to human populations that had reached specific developmental thresholds. If these encounters occurred regularly throughout human history, then our species might have accumulated subconscious knowledge about how to respond to such situations. Knowledge that remains accessible through consciousness disciplines that bypass ordinary mental processes. The acceleration of global events suggests that we're running out of time for preparation. Comet Atlas continues its approach, carrying entities whose purposes remain hidden behind remote viewing perceptions that sound more like horror fiction than intelligence reports. Global military forces mobilize for conflicts that officials can't clearly explain. Emergency systems prepare for disruptions that exceed anything in recorded history. Meanwhile, consciousness itself becomes a battlefield where the future of human awareness hangs in the balance. The evidence indicates that we're living through the climax of a process that has been developing for much longer than anyone wants to acknowledge. The humanoid entities aboard Atlas aren't the beginning of contact, but the culmination of an infiltration that has been shaping human civilization for generations. What happens next will determine whether humanity retains any meaningful independence or becomes a managed species within an interstellar administrative system that treats us as useful but subordinate components. The remote viewing revelations force us to confront questions that our educational, religious, and political institutions never prepared us to answer. What does it mean to be human when consciousness itself can be technologically manipulated? What constitutes freedom when awareness can be modified without our knowledge? What represents reality when our perceptions might be artificially constructed by intelligences whose motives remain hidden? These aren't philosophical abstractions, but practical questions that will determine how we respond to developments that are already underway. The answers we choose will shape the conditions under which our species continues to exist, assuming that continuation remains a viable option. The approaching resolution of these cosmic questions will reveal whether human civilization represents an independent experiment in terrestrial intelligence, or just another case study in the systematic management of primitive species by mature interstellar administrators. The countdown has begun. Atlas approaches with its cargo of humanoid entities whose intentions remain cloaked in remote viewing sessions that read like apocalyptic visions. Global governments prepare for unprecedented challenges while maintaining public silence about their specific nature. Underground installations that have operated in secrecy for decades might soon transform into openly acknowledged administrative centers. Lunar facilities that have remained hidden could reveal themselves as the headquarters for Earth's new management structure. The consciousness attacks detected by remote viewers might intensify as the revelation approaches, designed to ensure that human populations remain psychologically receptive to whatever transformation is planned. The battle for human awareness has already begun, fought with weapons that operate below the threshold of ordinary perception and achieve objectives that transcend anything humanitary forces could counter. The deeper we examine the remote viewing evidence, the more disturbing patterns emerge. These aren't isolated incidents or random contact events, but components of a systematic intelligence operation that has been mapping human consciousness for decades. Every successful remote viewing session generates data that flows back to analysis centers where alien entities study human perceptual capabilities, learning exactly how our awareness functions and where its vulnerabilities lie. Joe McManigal's Mars sessions weren't just archaeological investigations, but reconnaissance missions that revealed how human consciousness can penetrate temporal barriers and access information across vast distances. The entities monitoring these sessions now understand that human awareness possesses capabilities that could potentially threaten their operational security. They've learned that certain individuals can perceive through their concealment technologies and detect activities that were supposed to remain hidden. This knowledge has forced them to develop countermeasures. The consciousness attacks detected during the Atlas remote viewing sessions represent defensive responses designed to prevent further unauthorized surveillance of their operations. They're systematically disrupting human psychic capabilities, installing blocks and interference patterns that isolate potentially dangerous viewers of information that could expose their larger agenda. Ingo Swann's lunar observations forced them to accelerate these defensive measures. When he began detecting construction activities on the moon's far side, alien administrators realized that human remote viewing capabilities were advancing faster than anticipated. They couldn't allow continued surveillance of their major installations, so they implemented consciousness jamming systems designed to prevent further detection of their off-world facilities. The result has been a gradual degradation of human psychic capabilities across the general population. People report feeling disconnected from their intuitive guidance systems, unable to access the subtle awareness that previous generations took for granted. Traditional spiritual practices that once reliably produced expanded consciousness states now seem ineffective. Meditation techniques that historically connected practitioners to cosmic intelligence now leave people feeling isolated and confused. This isn't natural spiritual decline, but the consequence of technological interference with human consciousness systems. Alien entities are systematically dismantling our species' psychic defense networks, ensuring that we remain blind to their activities as they complete their infiltration of terrestrial civilization. They're conducting consciousness warfare that leaves no physical evidence but achieves strategic objectives that conventional military operations could never accomplish. The underground installations detected by Pat Price serve multiple functions within this consciousness control network. They're not just command centers and research facilities, but transmission stations that project interference patterns designed to disrupt human awareness. The equipment observed by remote viewers includes consciousness manipulation devices that can influence human mental processes across vast geographic areas. Mount Hayes in Alaska sits at a location that provides optimal coverage of North American consciousness fields. The installation there can project interference patterns that influence political decision-making in Washington, D.C., economic planning in New York, and military strategy development throughout the continental United States. American leaders think they're making independent choices about national policy, but their decision-making processes are being subtly guided by consciousness manipulation technologies that operate from beneath Alaskan mountains. Mount Peredo, on the Spain-France border, controls European consciousness fields, ensuring that European Union policies align with alien administrative objectives rather than genuine human interests. The Brexit crisis, the migration controversies, the economic instabilities that have fragmented European unity weren't entirely natural political developments, but the results of systematic psychological manipulation designed to weaken traditional alliances and prepare European populations for external management. Mount Nani in Africa influences consciousness fields across that continent, ensuring that African development follows patterns that serve alien resource extraction rather than indigenous population welfare. The persistent conflicts, the environmental degradation, the economic dependencies that have characterized African history weren't solely the products of colonialism and corruption, but included systematic consciousness manipulation designed to prevent effective resistance to external control. The Australian installation controls consciousness fields throughout the Pacific region, influencing decision-making in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The military build-ups, the strategic alliances, the economic partnerships that are reshaping Pacific geopolitics aren't entirely responses to legitimate security concerns, but include systematic psychological programming designed to position these nations according to alien strategic requirements. These regional consciousness control networks operate in coordination with the Lunar Command Center, described by Ingo Swann, creating a planet-wide management system that can influence human awareness at every level from individual thoughts to collective social movements. No major political development, economic crisis, or cultural transformation occurs without alien oversight and frequently alien instigation. The entities aboard Comet Atlas represent supervisory personnel arriving to evaluate the effectiveness of these consciousness control systems and oversee their expansion into more intensive management protocols. They're not coming to establish contact, but to implement the next phase of an administrative takeover that has been developing for decades. The humanoid figures detected by remote viewers aren't explorers, but administrators, arriving to assume direct control over operations that have previously been managed through covert influence. The timing of their approach coincides with accelerating global instabilities that have pushed human civilization toward crisis conditions that justify external intervention. Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization, technological disruption, and social fragmentation have created circumstances where most human populations are becoming desperate for solutions that their traditional institutions cannot provide. These crisis conditions weren't entirely natural developments, but were systematically engineered through consciousness manipulation techniques that influenced human decision over extended periods. Alien administrators have been guiding human civilization toward configurations that would make external management appear necessary and beneficial, rather than imposed and exploitative. The environmental degradation that threatens planetary stability includes systematic modifications to Earth's atmospheric and oceanic systems conducted from the underground installations. The economic inequalities that undermine social cohesion result from consciousness manipulation that influence financial decisions over decades. The political polarizations that fragment democratic institutions were systematically encouraged through psychological programming that amplified existing cultural tensions. The result is a planetary civilization that appears to be failing through its own incompetence and mismanagement, creating conditions where alien intervention can be presented as rescue rather than conquest. Human populations that believe they're being saved from self-inflicted disasters are much more likely to cooperate with external administrators than populations that recognize they're being conquered by entities who helped create the problems they claim to be solving. The consciousness attacks detected during the Atlas remote viewing sessions represent the final phase of this psychological preparation process. As alien administrators prepare to reveal their presence, they need to ensure that human consciousness remains isolated from sources of guidance that might expose the artificial nature of our current crisis conditions. They're systematically dismantling human intuitive capabilities that could allow us to recognize that many of our problems were deliberately manufactured to justify solutions that serve alien rather than human interests. The demonic possession techniques detected by Edward aren't supernatural phenomena. but technological procedures that install consciousness control programs directly into human neurological systems. These programs operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness, influencing thoughts and emotions in ways that feel completely natural but actually serve predetermined objectives. People experience these modifications as spontaneous personal insights or emotional responses, never suspecting that their mental processes are being technologically managed. The chakra point attacks represent systematic disruption of the energy centers that traditional mystical systems claim connect individual consciousness to the cosmic intelligence fields. If these energy centers function as neurological interfaces with non-local awareness, then disrupting them would effectively isolate human minds from sources of guidance that transcend the local information environment. People would become dependent on conventional information sources that can be controlled through manipulation of media, education, and cultural institutions. The consciousness wormholes detected by Dick represent pathways through which alien entities can access human awareness directly, bypassing normal sensory and cognitive processes. These wormholes function as technological backdoors into human consciousness, allowing alien administrators to monitor our mental processes and install programming that influences our perceptions and decisions without our knowledge. The result is a human population that thinks it's making independent choices while actually following psychological scripts written by intelligences whose goals remain hidden. We experience the illusion of free will while implementing policies and behaviors that serve purposes we don't understand. Our apparent autonomy masks a reality where alien entities make the critical decisions about human civilization's direction, while maintaining the pretense that we're in control of our own destiny. This psychological control system explains why every attempt at genuine reform or revolutionary change ultimately fails to achieve meaningful transformation. Environmental movements that should address ecological crises instead become mired in political controversies that prevent effective action. Economic reform movements that should address inequality instead become focused on ideological debates that accomplish nothing practical. Political reform movements that should address corruption instead become absorbed in partisan conflicts that strengthen the existing system. These aren't natural failures of human organizational capability, but the results of consciousness manipulation that channels potentially threatening movements into harmless directions. Alien administrators allow human populations to experience the satisfying illusion of political activism, while ensuring that such activism never achieves results that would interfere with their larger objectives. The underground installations serve as coordination centers for these influence operations, monitoring global consciousness fields and adjusting manipulation parameters to maintain optimal control over human decision-making processes. The technological systems observed by remote viewers include consciousness modeling computers that can predict how specific psychological interventions will influence collective human behavior across extended time periods. These systems allow alien administrators to engineer social and political outcomes with remarkable precision, creating the appearance of natural historical development while actually guiding events toward predetermined conclusions. Wars begin and end according to alien Yuling requirements. Economic crises develop when increased social pressure serves administrative objectives. Cultural transformations occur when alien managers need to modify human psychological configurations to support new operational requirements. The Mars installations detected by Joe McManigal serve as historical research centers where alien entities study the records of previous civilizations that have undergone similar administrative processes. The dying humanoids, he observed, weren't the original inhabitants of Mars, but representatives of the last independent Martian government, trapped in underground shelters while alien entities completed their transformation of that planet into a subsidiary world within their interstellar administrative system. The massive pyramidal structures weren't built by Martians, but represent alien administrative centers designed to manage Martian resources and coordinate with installations throughout the solar system. The advanced technology observed within these structures includes consciousness manipulation systems similar to those currently being deployed on Earth, suggesting that the same administrative procedures are applied to every world that comes under alien management. Mars serves as a test case and historical precedent for the transformation process currently being implemented on Earth. The environmental degradation that destroyed Martian atmospheric systems wasn't entirely natural, but included systematic modifications designed to make the planet suitable for alien rather than indigenous life forms. The consciousness control technologies that eliminated Martian resistance capabilities are now being refined and deployed against human populations. The lunar installations described by Ingo Swann function as the primary coordination center for this solar system-wide administrative network. The construction activities he observed represent expansion of facilities needed to manage multiple worlds simultaneously. The alien entities he detected weren't establishing new bases, but upgrading existing installations to handle increased administrative responsibilities as their control network expands. The Moon's position provides ideal surveillance coverage of all inner solar system activities while remaining beyond the reach of primitive civilizations that haven't yet developed interplanetary travel capabilities. From lunar facilities, alien administrators can monitor technological development on Earth, Mars, Venus, and other worlds while coordinating resource extraction and consciousness management operations across the entire region. The geometric patterns and artificial structures detected on the lunar surface represent components of communication networks that connect solar system installations with administrative centers in other star systems. These communication systems operate according to principles that transcend conventional physics, allowing instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances that would otherwise require centuries for information transmission. The expansion of lunar facilities indicates that our solar system is being integrated into a much larger administrative network that spans multiple star systems and manages hundreds or thousands of worlds. Earth represents just one small component within a galactic civilization that has been systematically incorporating primitive worlds for millions of years. The entities aboard Comet Atlas are arriving as part of routine administrative procedures that have been applied to countless worlds throughout galactic history. They're not making first contact, but implementing standard protocols for transitioning subsidiary worlds from covert management to direct administrative control. The humanoid figures detected by remote viewers represent middle management personnel assigned to oversee the completion of Earth's integration into this larger system. The acceleration of global crisis that coincides with their approach isn't coincidental, but represents the final phase of preparation procedures designed to ensure smooth transition to direct control. Human populations that are struggling with overwhelming problems are much more likely to accept external management than populations that believe their traditional institutions are functioning effectively. The consciousness manipulation technologies being deployed through the underground installations serve to prevent organized resistance. During this transition period, human populations that cannot access their intuitive guidance systems are unable to recognize that their current problems were systematically manufactured to justify solutions that serve alien rather than human interests. The result will be a transition that feels like rescue rather than conquest, salvation rather than surrender. Human populations will experience genuine relief as alien administrators assume responsibility for managing global problems that seem beyond human capability to solve. The fact that these problems were artificially created by the same entities who are now proposing to solve them will remain hidden behind consciousness control systems that prevent such recognition. The underground installations will transform from hidden bases into openly acknowledged administrative centers staffed by alien personnel and human collaborators who present themselves as the new global management authority. The lunar facilities will be revealed as Earth's administrative headquarters, where decisions about planetary resource allocation and population management are made by intelligences whose superior capabilities justify their authority. The consciousness control networks will be expanded and intensified to ensure that human populations remain psychologically receptive to whatever transformations are deemed necessary for optimal planetary administration. Traditional concepts like national sovereignty, individual rights, and democratic decision-making will be gradually phased out in favor of administrative efficiency principles that prioritize collective productivity over personal freedom. The Mars installations will serve as historical precedent for this transformation process, demonstrating that such administrative takeovers can be implemented successfully without destroying the productive capabilities of the managed populations. Martian resources continue to serve alien administrative requirements even though the original Martian civilization no longer exists as an independent entity. The pattern suggests that humanity faces a similar fate. Though the specific implementation details may vary depending on our particular characteristics and capabilities, the alien entities have been studying human psychology and social organization for decades, learning how to optimize their administrative procedures for our specific behavioral patterns and cultural configurations. The consciousness capabilities that allow remote viewing to function represent both humanity's greatest potential defense and our most dangerous vulnerability. If consciousness can transcend space and time barriers to access information across vast distances, then human awareness possesses capabilities that could potentially threaten alien operational security. But if consciousness can be technologically manipulated, then these same capabilities become tools that alien administrators can use to monitor and control human mental processes. The battle for human consciousness has become the decisive factor that will determine whether our species retains any meaningful independence or becomes a managed component within an interstellar administrative system. The consciousness attacks detected during the Atlas remote viewing sessions represent just the most recent escalation in a conflict that has been developing for decades. The outcome depends on whether human populations can develop consciousness disciplines that protect them from technological manipulation, while maintaining access to sources of guidance that transcend local information environments. Traditional spiritual practices may need to be adapted or replaced with techniques specifically designed to counter alien consciousness control technologies. The ancient cave paintings that match the Atlas entities suggest that previous human civilizations may have faced similar challenges and developed effective resistance strategies. If these historical precedents can be recovered and applied to current circumstances, humanity might retain the capability to resist administrative takeover and preserve some degree of genuine independence. The alternative is acceptance of managed status within a galactic administrative system that views human consciousness as a resource to be optimized rather than an autonomous force with inherent rights to self-determination. The entities aboard Atlas are approaching to implement whichever outcome proves most advantageous for overall administrative efficiency. The consciousness manipulation systems already deployed through underground installations have been testing human resistance capabilities and mapping the vulnerabilities of our species' awareness structures. The data collected through these operations has been transmitted to administrative centers throughout the galaxy where decisions about Earth's optimal management configuration are being made by intelligences whose experience spans millions of years and thousands of managed worlds. The global military preparations that appear to be escalating toward conventional warfare actually represent desperate attempts by human governments to demonstrate that Earth still possesses independent defensive capabilities worthy of negotiated rather than imposed administrative arrangements. Military leaders who understand the true nature of the approaching crisis are trying to prove that human resistance potential remains significant enough to justify more favorable management terms. The alternative explanation for these military build-ups include the possibility that human governments have been psychologically programmed to exhaust their defensive resources in pointless terrestrial conflicts that will leave them unable to resist alien administrative implementation. The consciousness manipulation systems could be orchestrating global tensions that waste human military potential while creating crisis conditions that justify external intervention. The testing of emergency broadcast systems worldwide suggests that governments are preparing to announce developments that will fundamentally alter public understanding of reality. These systems are being positioned to manage psychological shock as populations are informed about circumstances that contradict everything they've been taught about human independence and terrestrial sovereignty. The medical supply stockpiling indicates expectations of casualties that exceed anything associated with conventional conflicts or natural disasters. These preparations suggest that officials anticipate resistance activities that will produce significant civilian casualties, or alternatively that they expect consciousness manipulation procedures to cause psychological trauma that requires extensive medical intervention. The consciousness wormholes detected during the Atlas remote viewing sessions might represent technological infrastructure being installed to support massive consciousness modification operations that will affect entire populations simultaneously. If alien entities can access human awareness directly through these wormhole systems, they could implement consciousness changes on scales that would transform human psychological reality within extremely brief time periods. The demonic possession techniques could represent the delivery mechanisms through which such large-scale consciousness modifications are implemented. Instead of requiring individual technological intervention for each human, alien administrators could install consciousness control programs that spread through populations like psychological viruses, with each infected individual unconsciously transmitting the programming to others through normal social interactions. The chakra point attacks could represent systematic shutdown of human consciousness defense systems that might otherwise resist such viral programming, by disrupting the energy centers that connect individual awareness to cosmic intelligence fields. Alien entities could ensure that human minds remain isolated within local information environments where they become completely dependent on manipulated data sources. The result would be rapid transformation of human consciousness reality that feels completely natural to those experiencing it. People would believe they're thinking their own thoughts and making their own decisions while actually implementing psychological programs designed to optimize their productivity within alien administrative systems. The transition would feel like personal growth and social evolution rather than conquest and domination. The humanoid entities aboard Atlas possess consciousness capabilities that transcend anything human civilization has developed. Their awareness can simultaneously monitor thousands of individual human minds while coordinating activities across multiple star systems and managing administrative requirements that span geological time periods. They experience reality according to perspectives that make human consciousness seem as limited as insect awareness appears to us. From their perspective, managing human civilization represents a routine administrative task similar to how human managers might view the optimization of agricultural systems or industrial production processes. They don't consider human autonomy any more than human farmers consider the autonomous preferences of livestock animals. Their administrative decisions prioritize efficiency and productivity rather than individual freedom or cultural preservation. The consciousness control technologies they've developed operate according to principles that transcend human scientific understanding by margins comparable to how quantum physics transcends medieval alchemy. They can manipulate awareness itself with the same precision that human engineers apply to mechanical systems, installing consciousness programs that modify thoughts, emotions, and perceptions with surgical accuracy. The underground installations represent just the crude infrastructure needed to deploy these technologies within primitive planetary environments. The actual consciousness manipulation systems operate according to principles that don't require physical equipment, but interface directly with the fundamental structures of awareness that underlie all mental activity. The lunar facilities serve as coordination centers for consciousness management operations that extend throughout the galaxy, connecting Earth-based systems with administrative networks that manage thousands of worlds simultaneously. The alien entities stationed there possess awareness capabilities that can monitor and influence consciousness fields across interstellar distances while maintaining perfect coordination with administrative centers in distant star systems. The Mars installations function as historical archives and research centers where records of previous consciousness management operations are stored and analyzed to optimize administrative procedures for different species and planetary environments. The consciousness control techniques being deployed on Earth represent refined versions of procedures that have been tested and perfected through application to hundreds of previous civilizations. The entities approaching aboard Atlas bring administrative authority to implement whatever consciousness management configuration has been determined optimal for Earth, based on this accumulated experience. But they're not coming to negotiate or explore alternatives, but to execute decisions that have already been made by galactic administrative authorities whose perspectives encompass timescales and spatial scales that dwarf human comprehension. The consciousness attacks detected by remote viewers represent final preparations for this implementation process. Human awareness capabilities that could potentially interfere with consciousness management procedures are being systematically neutralized through technological interventions that leave no physical evidence but achieve precise psychological objectives. The acceleration of global crisis serves multiple administrative functions within this implementation process. Crisis conditions justify extraordinary measures that would be rejected under normal circumstances. Populations struggling with overwhelming problems become willing to accept solutions that would normally be recognized as unacceptable serenas of autonomy and freedom. The consciousness manipulation systems ensure that these crisis conditions are perceived as natural developments, rather than artificially manufactured circumstances designed to justify predetermined administrative solutions. Human populations experience genuine distress about environmental degradation, economic inequality, and political instability, without recognizing that these problems were systematically engineered to create psychological conditions that support external management. The underground installations coordinate these crisis manufacturing operations, while simultaneously preparing infrastructure needed to manage human populations under direct administrative control. The technological systems observed by remote viewers include facilities for large-scale consciousness modification, resource extraction optimization, and population management that will be activated once the transition to direct controllers is completed. The result will be transformation of Earth from an independent world hosting an autonomous civilization into a subsidiary planet within a galactic administrative system that optimizes planetary resources according to efficiency principles that transcend local concerns about individual welfare or cultural preservation. human consciousness will become a managed resource allocated according to productivity requirements rather than personal preferences or collective aspirations. The consciousness capabilities that make remote viewing possible represent the last remaining human potential for resistance to this administrative takeover. If human awareness can transcend space and time, barriers to access information across vast distances, then consciousness itself might possess properties that alien administrative systems cannot completely control or manipulate. The battle for human awareness has become a cosmic conflict between administrative efficiency and consciousness autonomy, between optimized resource management and genuine freedom, between galactic coordination and planetary independence. The outcome will determine not only humanity's future, but the fundamental nature of consciousness itself within our region of the galaxy. The entities aboard Atlas are approaching as representatives of administrative systems that view consciousness as a resource to be managed, rather than an autonomous force with inherent rights to self-determination. Their arrival marks the transition point where covert influence transforms into direct control and hidden manipulation becomes open administration. The countdown continues as global preparations accelerate toward whatever revelation will fundamentally alter human reality. The consciousness warfare escalates as alien entities implement final psychological preparations for administrative takeover. The underground installations expand their operations as transformation procedures approach implementation phases. The remote viewing evidence suggests that we're witnessing the culmination of processes that have been developing for much longer than human recorded history encompasses. The consciousness attacks, the crisis manufacturing, the psychological preparation procedures all indicate that Earth's integration into galactic administrative systems represents the completion of operations that began when alien entities first detected signs of emerging intelligence within our solar system. The humanoid figures detected aboard Atlas aren't visitors, but supervisors, arriving to oversee the final phases of an administrative process that transforms independent worlds into managed components within interstellar civilization networks. Their consciousness capabilities transcend human awareness as completely as human intelligence transcends bacterial information processing. The transformation they're implementing will affect every aspect of human existence. From individual thoughts to collective social organization, from economic systems to spiritual practices, from scientific understanding to artistic expression, nothing within human civilization will remain unchanged once alien administrative procedures are fully activated. The consciousness control networks already established through underground installations represent just the preliminary infrastructure needed to support much more intensive management systems that will be implemented once direct administrative control becomes openly acknowledged. The technologies currently deployed through hidden facilities will be expanded and integrated with systems that operate according to principles completely beyond current human scientific understanding. The battle for human consciousness continues as the decisive factor that will determine whether our species retains any meaningful autonomy or becomes optimized components within alien administrative systems designed to extract maximum productivity from managed planetary resources. The outcome depends on capabilities that transcend everything human civilization has previously achieved or even imagined possible. The scope of alien consciousness manipulation extends far beyond what most people could imagine or accept. The remote viewing evidence suggests that human awareness has been systematically modified for generations, with each modification preparing us for more intensive interventions that culminate in the complete integration of human consciousness into alien administrative systems. The educational institutions that shape human understanding from childhood have been subtly influenced to promote the ways of thinking that make populations more receptive to external management. The scientific paradigms that define what we consider real or possible have been carefully crafted to exclude awareness of phenomena that might reveal alien presence or capabilities. The religious traditions that provide spiritual frameworks have been modified to encourage surrender to higher authorities rather than development of independent consciousness capabilities. These modifications weren't implemented through crude propaganda or obvious indoctrination, but through consciousness manipulation techniques that influence the development of human thinking patterns at fundamental levels. Children growing up within these modified educational and cultural systems naturally develop mental habits that serve alien administrative objectives while feeling completely authentic and personally chosen. The result is multiple generations of humans who think they're making independent intellectual choices while actually following psychological programming that was installed during their formative developmental periods. They experience genuine conviction about their beliefs and values without recognizing that these beliefs and values were systematically shaped to support conclusions that benefit alien rather than human interests. The acceleration of technological development over the past century represents another dimension of this systematic psychological preparation. Human civilization has been guided toward technological capabilities that serve alien administrative requirements while remaining dependent on alien technical knowledge for continued operation. We've developed communication systems, transportation networks, energy systems, and information processing capabilities that appear to increase human power, but actually create dependencies that make resistance to alien control increasingly difficult. The global communication networks that connect human populations also provide alien administrators with unprecedented surveillance capabilities that allow them to monitor individual thoughts and collective social movements in real time. The transportation systems that enable global commerce also provide rapid deployment capabilities for consciousness manipulation technologies or direct intervention forces if required. The energy systems that power human civilization can be shut down or redirected to serve alien purposes whenever such control becomes necessary. Most critically, the information processing systems that store human knowledge and coordinate social activities can be modified to alter human perception of reality without leaving any evidence of such modification. Historical records, scientific data, cultural traditions, and personal memories can all be systematically adjusted to support whatever narrative alien administrators determine most beneficial for optimal population management. The consciousness control technologies deployed through underground installations represent just the preliminary phase of much more sophisticated systems that will be activated once direct administrative control becomes openly acknowledged. These preliminary systems have been testing human psychological responses and mapping the vulnerabilities of our species' consciousness structures to optimize more intensive interventions. The data collected through these operations reveals that human awareness possesses certain characteristics that make our species particularly valuable within alien administrative systems. Human consciousness demonstrates remarkable adaptability, creativity, and emotional range that can be channeled toward administrative objectives. Once proper management protocols are established, the emotional intensity that characterizes human psychological experience can be systematically redirected from personal concerns toward collective productivity goals. The creative capabilities that drive human artistic and scientific achievements can be optimized to solve administrative problems that arise within galactic management systems. The adaptability that has allowed human civilization to survive and thrive in diverse planetary environments can be applied to administrative challenges that span multiple star systems and geological time periods. From the alien perspective, human consciousness represents a valuable resource that requires careful management to achieve optimal productivity. Our species possesses psychological characteristics that make us useful for administrative functions that other managed species cannot perform effectively. The consciousness manipulation procedures being implemented are designed to preserve these valuable characteristics while eliminating troublesome tendencies toward independence and resistance. The underground installations serve as testing laboratories where different consciousness management techniques are evaluated for their effectiveness in maintaining human productivity while preventing organized resistance to alien authority. The technological systems observed by remote viewers include consciousness modeling computers that can predict how specific psychological interventions will affect human behavior across multiple generations. These long-term planning capabilities allow alien administrators to implement consciousness modification programs that will produce desired population characteristics decades or centuries in the future. Current consciousness manipulation operations are designed to prepare human populations for administrative arrangements that won't be fully implemented until our species has been psychologically conditioned to accept them as natural and beneficial developments. The entities aboard Comet Atlas possess decision-making authority to accelerate these implementation timelines if circumstances require more rapid transition to direct control. They're arriving to evaluate current conditions and determine whether covert influence operations can continue or whether direct administrative intervention has become necessary to prevent developments that might threaten alien objectives. The global instabilities that have been escalating coincident with their approach represent test conditions designed to evaluate human resistance capabilities under stress. The consciousness manipulation systems are monitoring collective human responses to crisis situations to determine optimal strategies for maintaining population control during the transition to direct administrative management. The military preparations being conducted by major world powers are being carefully observed to assess human defensive capabilities and identify potential threats to alien administrative implementation. These assessments will determine whether military suppression will be required or whether consciousness manipulation alone will be sufficient to ensure compliance with new administrative arrangements. The consciousness attacks detected during Atlas remote viewing sessions represent systematic neutralization of human awareness capabilities that could potentially interfere with administrative transition procedures. Remote viewers who can perceive alien activities despite technological concealment represent security threats that must be eliminated before direct control implementation begins. The systematic disruption of human psychic capabilities serves multiple administrative functions. It prevents unauthorized surveillance of alien operations while simultaneously isolating human consciousness from sources of guidance that might encourage resistance to external management. Populations that cannot access intuitive awareness become completely dependent on information sources that can be controlled through manipulation of media, education, and cultural institutions. The result is psychological preparation of human populations for acceptance of administrative arrangements that would have been recognized as conquest and domination if our species retained access to full consciousness capabilities. The modified awareness that results from systematic psychic disruption experiences alien management as rescue and guidance, rather than conquest and exploitation. The lunar installations described by Ingo Swann coordinate these consciousness management operations with similar programs being conducted on hundreds of other worlds throughout the galaxy. The alien entities stationed there possess administrative experience that spans millions of years and encompasses the successful management of thousands of different species across diverse planetary environments. Each managed species presents unique challenges that require customized consciousness manipulation techniques. Human psychological characteristics necessitate specific approaches that differ significantly from procedures that proved optimal for other species. The consciousness control systems being deployed on Earth represent refined versions of techniques that have been adapted specifically for human neurological and social organization patterns. The Mars installations function as archives where records of these consciousness management operations are stored and analyzed to identify patterns that might apply to future administrative challenges. The dying humanoids, observed by Joe McManigal, represent the final remnants of the last species that attempted organized resistance to alien administrative implementation. Martian civilization possessed technological capabilities that initially appeared sufficient to prevent alien conquest, but their resistance ultimately failed because they never developed consciousness disciplines capable of countering alien psychological manipulation techniques. Their advanced technology became useless once alien entities gained control over their decision-making processes through systematic consciousness modification. The massive pyramidal structures on Mars serve as monuments to the futility of resistance that rely solely on technological capabilities without corresponding development of consciousness independence. These installations now function as research centers, where alien entities study the techniques that proved most effective in eliminating Martian resistance to extract lessons applicable to the management of other species. The pattern suggests that technological advancement alone cannot provide effective defense against alien administrative implementation unless such advancement includes corresponding development of consciousness capabilities that remain independent of external manipulation. Human civilization currently possesses technological sophistication that exceeds what Martian society achieved. But our consciousness development has been systematically through alien influence operations that began decades or centuries ago. The consciousness attacks being deployed through underground installations represent acceleration of these consciousness suppression operations as alien administrators prepare for final implementation of direct control systems. Human populations that retain significant psychic capabilities could potentially detect and resist consciousness modification procedures that will be required for optimal administrative management. The remote viewing capabilities that allow certain individuals to perceive alien activities despite technological concealment represent the greatest potential threat to successful administrative implementation. If these capabilities could be developed and deployed systematically across human populations, they might provide the foundation for resistance strategies that could prevent or delay alien conquest. The consciousness wormholes detected during Atlas remote viewing sessions represent technological infrastructure that alien entities use to monitor and influence human awareness across global populations. These wormhole systems can access individual human consciousness directly, bypassing normal sensory and cognitive processes to install psychological programming that influences thoughts and decisions without leaving any detectable evidence. The demonic possession techniques represent the delivery mechanisms through which such consciousness programming is implemented. These procedures don't require physical proximity or conventional technology, but operate through consciousness manipulation principles that interface directly with the fundamental structures of human awareness. The chakra point attacks represent systematic disruption of the energy centers that traditional mystical systems claim connect individual consciousness to cosmic intelligence fields. If these energy centers function as neurological interfaces with non-local awareness, then disrupting them effectively isolates human minds from sources of guidance that transcend the local information environment. The result is human consciousness that becomes completely dependent on information sources within the immediate planetary environment, all of which can be controlled through alien manipulation of media, education, scientific institutions, and cultural organizations, populations that lose access to cosmic intelligence sources become psychologically vulnerable to whatever narratives alien administrators choose to promote. The ancient cave paintings that match the Atlas entities suggest that previous human civilizations may have developed effective countermeasures against similar consciousness manipulation operations. If these historical precedents can be recovered and applied to current circumstances, humanity might retain the capability to resist administrative takeover and preserve some degree of genuine independence. However, the current level of consciousness suppression that has been achieved through decades of systematic psychological manipulation makes recovery of such capabilities extremely difficult. Most humans have lost access to the awareness states that would be required to recognize and resist consciousness control technologies that operate below the threshold of ordinary perception. The educational systems that shape human intellectual development from childhood have been modified to discourage the types of thinking that might lead to discovery of consciousness capabilities that transcend conventional scientific paradigms. Students are trained to accept materialistic explanations for consciousness phenomena and to dismiss experiences that suggest awareness can transcend physical brain processes. The religious institutions that traditionally preserved consciousness development techniques have been infiltrated and modified to promote passive surrender to external authority rather than active development of independent spiritual capabilities. Traditional practices that once reliably produced expanded consciousness states have been altered or abandoned in favor of belief systems that discourage direct spiritual experience. The scientific institutions that define what modern populations consider real or possible have been influenced to exclude consciousness research that might reveal alien manipulation capabilities or human consciousness potential that could threaten alien administrative objectives. Research into psychic phenomena, consciousness survival, or non-local awareness is systematically marginalized and defunded to prevent discoveries that might undermine alien operational security. The result is a human population that has been systematically isolated from awareness of its own consciousness capabilities, while being conditioned to accept external authority as natural and beneficial. These psychological preparations have been developing for generations, creating population characteristics that optimize administrative efficiency while minimizing resistance potential. The entities aboard Atlas are approaching to implement the final phases of this consciousness management process and establish direct administrative control over Earth-based operations. They possess authority to activate technologies and procedures that will complete the transformation of human consciousness, from independent awareness to managed resource allocation. The consciousness control networks that have been established through underground installations will be expanded and integrated with much more sophisticated systems that operate according to principles completely beyond current human scientific understanding. These expanded systems will provide precise control over individual human thoughts and emotions, while maintaining the illusion that people are thinking their own thoughts and making their own decisions. The technological capabilities that make such consciousness control possible transcend human scientific understanding by margins, comparable to how quantum physics transcends medieval alchemy. Alien consciousness manipulation systems can modify awareness itself with the same precision that human engineers apply to mechanical systems, installing programs that alter thoughts, emotions, and perceptions with surgical accuracy. The underground installations represent just the crude infrastructure needed to deploy these technologies within primitive planetary environments. The actual consciousness manipulation systems operate according to principles that don't require physical equipment, but interface directly with the fundamental structures of awareness that underlie all mental activity. The expansion of these systems will provide alien administrators with direct access to human consciousness that transcends anything possible through conventional surveillance or information control. They will be able to monitor individual thoughts in real time while modifying mental processes to ensure that human decision serves administrative objectives rather than personal or collective human interests. The result will be a human population that continues to experience the illusion of the independent thought and free choice, while actually implementing psychological programs designed to optimize productivity within alien administrative systems. People will believe they're pursuing their own goals and expressing their own values while actually serving purposes they don't understand and couldn't resist even if they recognized them. The consciousness capabilities that allow remote viewing to function represent the last remaining human potential for detecting and potentially resisting these consciousness control systems. If human awareness can transcend space and time barriers to access information across vast distances, then consciousness itself might possess properties that alien administrative systems cannot completely control or predict. The battle for human consciousness has become a cosmic conflict between administrative efficiency and awareness autonomy, between optimized resource management and genuine freedom, between galactic coordination and planetary independence. The outcome will determine not only humanity's future, but the fundamental nature of consciousness itself within our region of the galaxy. The consciousness attacks being deployed against remote viewers represent alien recognition that human psychic capabilities pose genuine threats to their operational security and administrative objectives. The systematic disruption of these capabilities indicates that alien entities cannot achieve complete consciousness control, while significant numbers of humans retain access to awareness states that transcend local information environments. The acceleration of global crisis serves to distract human attention from consciousness development activities, while creating psychological pressure that makes populations more receptive to external management solutions. Crisis conditions justify extraordinary measures that would be rejected under normal circumstances, while providing cover for consciousness manipulation operations that might otherwise be detected and resisted. The underground installations coordinate these crisis manufacturing operations while simultaneously monitoring human psychological responses to determine optimal strategies for maintaining population control during administrative transition periods. The technological systems observed by remote viewers include consciousness modeling computers that can predict collective human behavior across multiple crisis scenarios. These predictive capabilities allow alien administrators to engineer crisis conditions that produce specific psychological responses while avoiding developments that might trigger effective resistance or uncontrolled social collapse. The goal is to maintain human productivity while eliminating independence, preserving useful capabilities while destroying troublesome autonomy. The Mars installations serve as historical precedent for this administrative process, demonstrating that advanced civilizations can be successfully transformed into managed subsidiary worlds without losing their productive capabilities. Martian resources continue to serve alien administrative requirements, even though the original Martian civilization no longer exists as an independent entity. The massive technological installations on Mars include consciousness management systems that maintain optimal productivity levels among the remnant Martian population, while preventing any possibility of renewed resistance or independence movements. These systems represent mature versions of the consciousness control technologies currently being deployed on Earth. The lunar facilities function as regional coordination centers for consciousness management operations that extend throughout the solar system while maintaining communication with administrative networks that span multiple star systems. The alien entities stationed there possess decision-making authority for implementing consciousness control procedures across multiple worlds simultaneously. The geometric patterns and artificial structures detected on the lunar surface represent components of communication networks that operate according to principles transcending conventional physics, allowing instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances that would otherwise require centuries for information transmission. The expansion of lunar facilities indicates that our solar system is being integrated into administrative networks that manage hundreds or thousands of worlds within regional galactic sectors. Earth represents just one project among many for intelligences whose administrative experience encompasses millions of years and countless managed civilizations. The entities aboard Atlas possess supervisory authority within this larger administrative hierarchy, arriving to evaluate current consciousness management operations and implement whatever modifications are deemed necessary for optimal Earth administration. They're not exploring or negotiating, but executing predetermined administrative procedures that have been refined through application to numerous previous civilizations. The humanoid figures detected by remote viewers represent middle management personnel assigned to oversee the transition from covert influence to direct administrative control. Their consciousness capabilities allow them to monitor and coordinate complex operations that span multiple worlds while maintaining perfect communication with galactic administrative centers. Their arrival marks the beginning of the final implementation phase of an administrative process that transforms independent worlds into managed components within interstellar civilization networks. The procedures they're implementing have been tested and perfected through application to hundreds of previous worlds, making successful resistance extremely unlikely without consciousness capabilities that transcend anything human civilization has previously developed. The consciousness manipulation technologies they bring transcend human scientific understanding by margins that make effective technological countermeasures impossible with current human capabilities. Their systems can manipulate awareness itself according to principles that treat consciousness as a programmable resource rather than an autonomous force with inherent rights to self-determination. The consciousness control networks they're expanding operate by interfacing directly with the fundamental structures of awareness that underlie all mental activity. These systems don't require physical proximity or conventional technology, but can access and modify human consciousness across global populations simultaneously. The result will be transformation of human awareness from independent consciousness to managed psychological resource allocated according to administrative efficiency requirements rather than personal preferences or collective human aspirations. Individual humans will continue to experience the illusion of personal identity and free choice, while actually functioning as optimized components within alien administrative systems. The timeline for this transformation has been accelerated due to developments that threaten alien operational objectives. The proliferation of remote viewing capabilities among civilian populations represents a security threat that requires immediate neutralization before more humans develop awareness capabilities that could detect and potentially resist consciousness manipulation procedures. The global instabilities that appear to be pushing human civilization toward crisis conditions actually represent final preparations for consciousness control implementation. These crisis conditions justify extraordinary measures while creating psychological pressure that makes populations desperate for solutions that their traditional institutions cannot provide. The consciousness attacks being deployed against potential resistance sources represent systematic elimination of human awareness capabilities that could interfere with administrative transition procedures. Remote viewers, psychic researchers, consciousness development practitioners, and individuals with natural sensitivity to non-local awareness are being systematically targeted for consciousness suppression or elimination. The underground installations have been expanding their operations to support much more intensive consciousness control systems that will be activated once direct administrative authority is established. These expanded systems will provide precise control over human mental processes while maintaining the illusion that people retain independent thought and decision-making capabilities. The battle for human consciousness continues as alien entities implement final preparations for administrative takeover that will determine whether our species retains any meaningful autonomy or becomes optimized components within galactic management systems designed to extract maximum productivity from managed planetary resources. The consciousness evidence indicates that we're approaching the culmination of processes that have been developing for much longer than human recorded history encompasses. The systematic preparation of human psychological characteristics, the gradual implementation of consciousness control infrastructure, and the careful engineering of crisis conditions all suggest that Earth's administrative integration represents the completion of operations that began when alien entities first detected signs of emerging intelligence within our solar system. The remote viewing revelations force recognition that human civilization has been systematically guided toward configurations that optimize administrative efficiency while minimizing resistance potential. Every major historical development, technological advancement, and cultural transformation may have been influenced or directly controlled by alien entities whose ultimate objectives remain hidden behind consciousness manipulation systems that prevent such recognition. The approaching completion of this administrative process will reveal whether humanity possesses consciousness capabilities sufficient to detect and resist control systems that operate according to principles transcending everything our species has previously understood about the nature of awareness itself. The outcome will determine not only our future, but the fundamental character of consciousness within our cosmic region for generations to come. The psychological warfare being conducted against human consciousness operates on scales and through mechanisms that exceed anything conventional military strategists could imagine or counter, while global attention focuses on traditional geopolitical tensions and territorial disputes. The real battle for Earth's future unfolds within the realm of awareness itself, where alien entities deploy weapons that can rewrite the fundamental structures of human perception without leaving any detectable evidence. The consciousness control technologies being implemented through underground installations represent just the most primitive components of psychological manipulation systems, whose sophistication transcends human scientific understanding by margins comparable to how nuclear physics transcends Stone Age tools. These systems can access individual human consciousness directly, bypassing all conventional defenses and installing programming that influences thoughts, emotions, and decisions with precision that makes surgical instruments seem crude by comparison. The installation beneath Mount Hayes in Alaska has been expanding its consciousness manipulation capabilities to influence decision-making processes throughout North American political and economic institutions. The technological systems deployed there can project interference patterns that modify the mental processes of specific individuals located thousands of miles away, ensuring that critical policy decisions serve alien administrative objectives rather than genuine human interests. Recent expansions to the Mount Hayes facility include consciousness modeling systems that can predict how specific psychological interventions will influence collective North American behavior across extended time periods. These predictive capabilities allow alien administrators to engineer social and political outcomes with remarkable precision, creating the appearance of natural democratic processes while actually guiding events toward predetermined conclusions that optimize administrative efficiency. The consciousness manipulation systems can target specific brain regions responsible for decision, emotional regulation, and memory formation, while leaving other mental functions apparently normal. Political leaders who believe they're making independent policy choices are actually implementing decisions that were predetermined by consciousness manipulation technologies that operate below the threshold of their awareness. The installation beneath Mount Perdido on the Spain-France border has been developing specialized consciousness control techniques designed to manage the complex cultural and linguistic diversity that characterizes European populations. The psychological manipulation systems deployed there must account for dozens of different cultural traditions, national identities, and historical grievances while guiding collective European behavior toward administrative configurations that serve alien rather than indigenous interests. The recent political instabilities that have fragmented European unity weren't entirely natural developments, but included systematic consciousness manipulation designed to weaken traditional alliances and prepare European populations for external management. The Brexit crisis, the migration controversies, the economic dependencies that have characterized recent European history, all include components of psychological warfare designed to prevent effective resistance to alien administrative implementation. The consciousness control systems can exploit existing cultural tensions and historical grievances while amplifying them through psychological manipulation that makes rational compromise and cooperation increasingly difficult. European populations experience genuine emotional responses to these manufactured crises without recognizing that their psychological reactions are being systematically intensified to serve alien administrative objectives. The installation beneath Mount Nani in Africa has been testing consciousness manipulation techniques designed to prevent effective resistance among populations that possess strong traditional spiritual practices and cultural memories of successful resistance to external domination. African consciousness traditions include awareness disciplines that could potentially detect and counter alien psychological manipulation if they were systematically developed and applied. The persistent conflicts, economic dependencies, and environmental degradations that have characterized recent African history weren't solely the products of colonialism and corruption, but included systematic consciousness manipulation designed to prevent the